Yo, what's happening, YouTube family? I hope that everybody's doing well out there. Now, are you somebody who wants to become a product designer and you're like, what the hell kind of skills do I need to develop? I'm looking at all these different YouTube videos and they're like, yo, I need to learn Figma, I need to learn soft skills. I don't know where to start. What skills do I need? In this video, I want to share my personal opinion on the technical skills that you need to develop. But overall, I think that there's two different skill sets that you need. There's your technical skills and your soft skills. I'll talk about the soft skills in a future video, but today, specifically, I want to go through a comprehensive list that I created about, based on my personal experience of working as a designer over the past 8 years. So let's dig into this. So when it comes to your technical skills, what does that mean? I think that if you're a product designer, there's four different areas where you use technical skills. There's UI design, there's UX design, there's your ability to prototype, and there's also having an understanding of how to use design systems. And we'll dig into each of these different topics. So when it comes to your UI design skills, you want to have an understanding of how to create hierarchy in the pages that you design. And hierarchy to me is just another way of saying focus, how to create focus in the layouts that you make, right? So if you look at the image of the magazine on the right side of this screen, you'll see that the header text where it says handmade in India kind of draws your eye in. And you might also want to look at the image on the left, right? So there's this ability that you need to develop to create focus in your designs. And one way you can do that is just by dissecting some of your favorite magazines, some of your favorite websites or newspapers, and just questioning, how certain things draw your eye in and how they make this all come together and create a cohesive layouts, right? So most often when I'm looking at an up and coming designer's personal project, I notice that they don't have a solid understanding or any awareness around how to leverage grid systems, right? And the text is all over the place. The images look like they're in random places. And if you are just starting out, you definitely want to dig into grid systems. And what you'll notice with the layout on the right side here is that the text is aligned to each of the columns. So it looks really cohesive, it looks really clean. And you definitely want to build a foundation of using grid systems in your layouts because that's what's gonna, make your layouts really clean. When it comes to using typography, I don't think that anybody needs to master this, right? If you, have a sense of general interest in typography, it's great to study. But I think that you just want to have an understanding of why certain websites use certain fonts and how they combine certain fonts together. If you pay attention to the Bible, any Bible that you pick up, a lot of times they use serif fonts because that was, the font that they use in that historical period, to give out information. And nowadays, you'll see a lot of sans serif fonts on modern websites. So just pay attention to the fonts that get used on some of your favorite websites, and then you can go into Figma and practice combining certain fonts together to see if it makes sense. That's fun. I don't think that you need to master it because when you work within an organization, a lot of times you're using the design system, right? But if you are somebody who's building out a brand guidelines for a specific company and you're a freelancer, you definitely want to get better at that area of design. When it comes to color theory, I also don't think that I'm a master at this, but I do think that it's important to understand when to use certain colors and how those colors are used across different cultures. One thing I learned over the years is that blue is used on a lot of financial websites because it kind of provokes trust with people who look at blue, at least in the Western world. And red evokes action, right? And as you can see in this Airbnb website, they're using like a hot pink on the logo, and then there's also, I think, like a hot pink on the search icon, but it provokes you to take a certain action. And the action that they want you to take is to get out there, plan your adventures, plan your trip, right? So it just, creates certain emotions. And color theory, when you study the philosophy of color theory, that's something that is very interesting to dig into. And if you're just like Jeremy, that was too complicated, I don't know where to start, I don't know what you're talking about, just Google graphic design principles and look at different articles where you'll see some of those principles in practice. And because I do think that graphic design principles cross over into UI design. When it comes to UX design, you definitely want to have a general understanding of different user flows for different industries. So for e-commerce websites, what you'll notice is that a lot of times you'll be looking at a product, you click on a tile for that product to get some more information. It'll take you to a details page. And on that details page, it might ask you the quantity of those products that you want. And then you go down this flow, right? But my point is that with every industry, there are certain patterns that are used, and you want to study what those patterns are, because when you're building out your personal portfolio project, you want to incorporate you want to incorporate those patterns, because that's what the general audience is familiar with. With research, you don't need to dig into this really far, but just have, an understanding of the differences between qualitative and quantitative research. Prototyping is something that you do as a product designer as well. When it comes to interaction design, pay attention to how certain things connect together, right? So if you are on a website and you hover over a button, you may get a different action that takes place, right? The button might change colors, something might happen, right? So you definitely want to break that stuff down with the references that you look at. Do you need to know every tool? No, you don't, but you do need to know when there is the appropriateness to use each tool, right? So if you are editing an image and you want to make that image look better, you'll use Photoshop. If you're designing a certain user flow, you use Figma. If you're doing an illustration, you'll use Illustrator. So just know things of that nature. If you get into animations, you want to have an understanding of the different reactions that these different animations do in the layouts that you create when you're in Figma or you're using any kind of animation tool, right? All of these different things have different visual reactions and they have different speeds, right? So I'm not going to dig into that further, but it is something that you want to at least study a little bit. Now, when you get a job as a product designer, most oftentimes you will use a design system. And within that design system, you might have different components for websites, different components for mobile applications, and you want to understand the differences between web and mobile applications, right? On web, there are different hover states when you hover over a button, but you don't get that on mobile, right? So just keep that in mind. You also want to understand how to use different components. And one way that I practiced that over the years is I would dig into Apple's design system and Android's design system, which is Material Design. So you can download UI kits for each of those different systems and try to build out your own Android app and try to build out your own iOS app, right? Use the components from those libraries and build out your own application, right? Within each of those systems, a lot of times you'll find that there are limitations. And when you work at a company, every system has its own limitations. And I noticed that I spelled alignment wrong here. But when you get a job within an organization in tech, oftentimes designers and engineers, they speak different languages, right? And so what you want to have an understanding of is when you're going through a design system, how is that information communicated with you? A lot of times when you're looking at colors, there are hex values, there's RGB values, but when you're talking to an engineer, they might be using something called it might be a design token. So that same blue color that says, B67891, whatever it is, might be interpreted differently for the engineer that you're working with. They might see it as blue dash zero, right? So just keep that in mind. It's not something that you need to this is not a something that you need to master before you get a job, but just keep that in mind. So yeah, guys, I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope that if you didn't know where to start, that this provides a little bit of structure. Now, do you need to start in one of these different areas, from the top of the list to the bottom? No, you don't. It all depends on what your starting point is right now. So if you are a photographer and an illustrator, maybe you might want to dig into UI design, right? And you want to go down the rabbit hole learning as much as you can about that specific area before getting into the others. If you're somebody who's really into animation and your dream is to design a children's mobile app, maybe you might want to get into prototyping, right? And learn everything that you can about creating animations in order to make an interesting website or mobile app for children, right? So I hear my daughter in the background. I got to get to my family. So yeah, guys, I hope that this video was helpful. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.